we're still talking with Urban, and we start talking about this magazine. You know, we have an idea. Again, another natural evolution of our business. All right, we're doing shows, we're doing college events. This is great. What else can we do that seems very organic? And then we thought, hey man, let's do a college magazine. Urban, we already have Urban as a sponsor, you know. And I don't know if whose idea was it to be an insert. It's probably theirs because it was more economical, and for them it was content. Um, and it's financially it's less expensive to be. They were going to allocate like 4 or 5 pages in their already existing magazine versus printing and binding something completely, you know, separate and apart. So financially, it made sense for both of us. And again, since I was the graphic designer on the team, I ended up doing that first cover, which is very hideous and very, very embarrassing. I don't. Oh, I wish I had. I'm not home right now, so I don't have the cover or anything of that. But do you recall anything else you can recall from
Yeah.
from the magazine launch?
Yeah, I remember. I think you were still in Georgia at the time, so you flew in to New York, and we had set up a specific meeting with Urban to pitch them on the idea. You're right. We had pitched it as a standalone product because we thought, that'd be much easier for us to distribute on campuses. And I remember they repositioned it back. Uh, like I give them credit for trusting two young guys who were, well, we had shown them something already with our ability to draw the attendance, and we had started to now, pitch this magazine that they, to their credit, said, look, we can't do it as a standalone, but we can do it as a 4 to 5 page insert. And I remember having full control over the editorial was something was important to us because we didn't want to make it something urban, like it had to be our thing. And so yeah, it's funny being so naive in a sense, like we had the cojones to like ask for everything, and we got it from them. So yeah, we were now tasked with, on top of putting on events locally and nationally, we also had to now create content in the first ever magazine towards this audience. So that was a whole lot of fun.
To your point, I mean, we're so young and naive. It's like I just always felt like for us it was just very easy to come up with ideas and just execute on ideas because all we needed was to know people. Like for a magazine is in theory, a magazine is very easy. All you need is like 8 writers to come up with 2 stories each, 16 stories, you know, do an editorial calendar for 12 months, and you need 12, you know, ideas for each month. And just it's all ideas driven. It's just like things you make up out of nowhere. So in theory, it is easy to come up with a magazine.
And don't forget, we were already on our website on Latino Step. We were already putting together articles. Like if you go back to that website, you'll see articles about how to get into Harvard for under, if your household income is under 40K. Like we were finding that content and trying to publish it out to the world already. So this was a natural progression into that arena.
Yeah. And I'm jumping ahead, but I remember when we were being acquired and negotiating with I Caramba, the CEO, David, of I Caramba, really didn't want to attribute any value, any dollar monetary value to the magazine. And I was like, no, man, this is important. It was like almost like a throw. It was like a throw in. It's like we just almost, or we practically just gave it to them. It's like an asset that they were going to own because they were when you buy a company, when you acquire a company, you acquire everything of that company, and this was a part of us. So what we should have done in hindsight, which our lawyer who he said, why don't you license the brand to Icaramba, which I think would have been a smarter way because to do it so that they pay, you know, they could have paid us a salary. We own the rights, and then the day that this partnership doesn't work, we walk away with our licensing. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think, like we said earlier, we were young and naive, so we didn't know any better. And we were up against. We didn't even know who was at the other side of the negotiating table. Like we kind of knew him, but we didn't really know him until we joined forces with him. But David Chattel, who's a great business leader, he really had our hand forced, because what he was proposing, which is acquiring our events business, was very attractive to us. I mean, and more to Anthony than myself at the time, but I think it was telling, that we had come that far, and part of it was a facade that we were making tons of money when we weren't making anything really. And so like it was a very promising opportunity for both of us. So we were able, or we were willing, I should say, to throw in a magazine that still hadn't made any official dollars yet. But you're right. I think in hindsight we could have totally asked for more.
Yeah, and the value that we see in hindsight is that the magazine, it's like you can never predict things when you're starting a business, is that the magazine ends up being a key part of our new bigger company, that the company that acquires us, which we now call like Ay Caramba at some point, the beginning, like it becomes like a big money generator. We're bringing in $500,000 in revenue at some point, which is, I think, aside from the Army, which was our main anchor sponsor, they were giving us a big budget too. But like that in the magazine was like the really big thing. And yes, what we do end up doing is we ended up taking the magazine out of the Urban and then doing a standalone print that we start mailing out. So all right, I won't get ahead into the business model of the magazine yet, I guess. But yeah. So I guess in hindsight, basically, yeah, we started the magazine to throw in, to the acquisition, but ends up being a bigger part of the business that we just can't foresee. Just like similarly, when we start doing step shows as a business, we end up doing a stroll show just by chance out of necessity because we're broke, and that the strolling ends up being like the anchor part of our business moving forward.
Sorry, I'm gonna just switch networks here because my Wi-Fi network is gonna die. So I'll chop this out. Um, how you doing in time? You can keep going. I can keep going.
Yeah, I'm good. Where should we go next though?
Let's go back to, or let's continue down the path of, if we can remember any conversations we had prior to the acquisition, because I think we're at the point where the magazine launched like 2 weeks before we got acquired. So I think it's a good point. Let's try to get to the end of 2002 here, and then wrap by like in a half hour, if that makes sense.
Wait,
Wait, you're mute.
sorry, I said go over that timeline you just mentioned. The timeline,
I said that
like
we Urban
we
published
launched.
October 4th,
Yep.
and that was the first issue of Universit Latino. And then on October 16th, we announced the acquisition, which, so 2
So
weeks
we were
after.
negotiating. So we were negotiating at the same time,
Yeah.
doing the magazine. Yeah, doing the magazine, getting acquired, um, and then okay, and then what do we talk about? So
Just
July. So you're saying I have notes here. Our notes are saying July and September we're negotiating to be acquired, an equity deal.
yeah, that's right.
So basically after Lehman, we start negotiating. We start talking, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I can start that off.
Okay. So go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. So basically, we're gonna take a step back and go into now, after 4 years of doing what we're doing, uh, a basket of a grace from God falls from the heavens, and someone says, "Hey guys, we really like what you're doing, and we want you to merge and buy. We want to buy your company out." Now, for anyone who has a business, started a business, some people start a business only to be acquired. Some people start a business because they love what they're doing. Some people that are mature, want to just grow the business because they want to grow the business and see it for themselves. 4 years in, we get this offer, and it's like, wow, like I don't know how I felt, but I know I was surprised. I was like, wow, this is interesting. We're doing these shows for free. We're making no money. There's no money to talk about, no money in the bank. We're not driving Benzes and Porsches like I'm sure people thought. We were like bawling. But and I thought to myself in my tiny little mind, I'm thinking to myself, this guy wants to pay me a salary for something I was doing for free. It's like that sounds like a good deal. I remember in business school, I had a professor say once in class, he was like, said, anytime you are at a negotiating table and you're able to walk away with more than you came in with, that's a good deal. You should always take you should always take it. And I remember, yeah, it's how you summarize things. It's like very easy. It's someone's giving you more than you had, and you're gonna be doing the same amount of work anyway. Why not take more? Why not take the offer? So to me, it was pretty simple. I mean, we weren't sophisticated enough to understand, should we license this? Should we license our brand? Should we, have a contract? A contract would have been a lot smarter for me, as our listeners will find out a few episodes down. I should have had a contract. But again, there's many ways to approach this, and I hope that, Seuss has 3 kids. I have one daughter. They're in a better position just because of the knowledge that we have. And so my daughter was watching your videos on YouTube today with your kids, and she loves watching YouTube anyway, but she was looking at your stuff, and she's like, she's looking at it, and afterwards she's like, I'm like, all right, it's enough screen time. Let's do something else. She's like, nosotros podemos hacer algo también. Nosotros podemos hacer unos videos de YouTube. I'm like, yeah, what do you want to do? She's like, bueno, podemos jugar el Wii. And I'm like, all right, what you got to do is, what do you like doing? Because whatever you like doing, other kids like doing it as well. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. But my point is that I forget my train of thought. Can you help me?
Yeah. So you were talking about negotiating and BATNAs and all that good stuff, but no. But to your point,
Wait, tell people what BATNA is, man. They don't be dropping
so,
Columbia
so
MBA terms without educating our listeners.
that's a business term. You knew BATNA
Yes,
before I did, but anyway,
no,
so
but educate our listeners to BATNA.
BATNA is an acronym which stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. BATNA. So what that means is, if you say no to this deal, what's your alternative? And so it's an interesting contrast between myself and Anthony. So Anthony was saying, give me money to do what I'm already doing, whereas I was in a different position at the time, so I had a more cushy job where I was doing the Latino step thing full time and getting paid for doing something else that was my day job, if you will. So I had the flexibility there, and also I was very suspicious of this Ay Caramba group. I didn't know who they were. I knew that they had tried to copy what we were doing and they were failing because of us. And so I was very, like I was trying to keep the grass as low as possible because you never know where the snakes are. And so I had my reservations about the possibility, whereas Anthony, had different ideas.
Yeah, that's interesting because in terms of our personalities, I'm usually the very non-trusting, very, you know, just like, nah, I don't know this guy. Like, but for some reason, like in our natural states, I'm that way. But in this situation, you were that way, which I remember thinking, like, this is so weird. Like, why is he complicating this when it's not very complicated? It's a very easy decision. Like, I didn't see. But on top of that, I saw like there was some structure. Like, yeah, I didn't know David at all, but what also what I felt comfort where I felt comfort was that I saw that they purchased or acquired LatinoGreeks.com, and Frank was working with them already. So I felt that even though Frank was our mortal enemy and our our nemesis and our mortal enemy. I felt that, wow, if he can work with this guy Dave, and they seemed comfortable, he seemed again, and I wasn't even talking to Frank at all. I was just observing, just my observations on, because Frank was a really smooth talker at the time, I thought. But I felt comfort in the sense that seeing, well, Dave already acquired Latino Greeks, so there's some trust established there. And I thought, everything was going to be on a contract. There were lawyers involved. Our lawyer was looking out for our best interest. And I remember our lawyer, which again, we'll give credit to Tony Martinez of formerly latinflava.com, but I think he's doing other things now. And he again, so he helps us with the put the teams on contract episode, and then he helps us with connecting us with this lawyer. Right? Was it him who connected us to this lawyer?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was. He
Okay.
introduced us to Paez.
Yeah, and our lawyer was Mauricio Paez. He did his JD at Rutgers. He was at a pretty heavy law firm, which it was called Jones Day. Jones Day, and they were pretty big at the time. And he was doing this pro bono, might I add. We didn't even have money to pay him. So he was now I remember years later looking up his specialty, and he was like intellectual property, like specialty. That's what he did: negotiations, JDs, joint ventures, JVs. Sorry, not JD, JVs, joint ventures, things like that. I remember at one point during the negotiation, he was like, "Listen, maybe you want to license your brand?" But I remember him giving us that idea like way farther down in the negotiating timeline, where had we started with, if we had from the beginning said we'll license it to you, I think would have been feasible. But at the time that he had mentioned licensing, it was just we were way too far in the timeline to consider or to bring up. What else? Hold on one
Well,
second.
I think from an acquisition perspective, as Anthony mentioned, I was hesitant. I remember even to the day where we walked into their offices in New York City. I remember Anthony and I walking towards the office. It was a cool New York City day, an evening, I should say. It was around 6 or 7 p.m. I remember, and we were walking towards the offices of Ay Caramba. And I remember telling Anthony, "Are you sure, man? Are you sure we're gonna do this? Like this feels like I still don't trust these guys. They've done nothing to show support." And I think a part of that also was I didn't know them at all. Like I never had a conversation with Frank or Dave. So you knew them personally. And that's why I kind of like at the end of it, I was just like, all right, man, you know these guys. I'm gonna trust you leading us here. And it's fortunate that we that we signed that day. And I remember, do you remember what Dave said to me the minute that we signed the paperwork? Do you remember?
Yeah, he said something stupid. I forget, like
He said, "You're
something that was
fired."
very,
He said to
yeah.
me, "You're fired," because he knew that I didn't trust him. Like he knew that I was very distrustful. And I think you had mentioned it to him. Like you said something like, "Oh yeah, we Jesus thought you were going to fire us day one and take our brand, et cetera," which I honestly believed. And so the first thing he says is, "You're fired," and a part of me dropped, like part of my heart dropped at that moment. But then, once I realized he was kidding and it was just a joke, then it all got improved from there.
Yeah, I do remember him saying that. It was a very silly thing for him to say for people that were, you know, um, yeah, hesitant. But anyway. So yeah, we end up, you know, doing the merger. We get acquired. I start working with them pretty quickly after that, and then the deal was that you were going to continue at your day job, and then come on. I think a year after we sign. Um, yeah, and then so I remember basically our first event was like November. So we signed in October, and they already have their you know calendar of where they're going to be, because they have a, Army as the anchor client. and we have to do a show in Orlando in November. And I remember working on that show in the office in our new, you know, quote unquote fancy offices. And I remember being on the phone and just trying to talk to teams and convince them to be in our shows. And I was on the phone trying to get numbers from other Greeks that have been in our show, like, hey, who do you know in Orlando, etc. But yeah, anything you want to add?
No, I wasn't in the office that first year, so I didn't really know the dynamics. I do remember asking you about them, and you kept constantly reassuring me that they're looking out for our best interests, and that they're serious about this, and so like I had the faith based on the fact that you were there full time and you could see things very clearly from kind of what was happening. But yeah, I do remember there was that expectation that just because we were acquired in October, now we have to like plug and play and improve everything they're doing like overnight, pretty much. And that was high expectations. But to the credit of Dave, and even to this day, like I still tell him this whenever I interact with him, that you know forcing the expectations to be much higher really forced us to get our game even better. And so there were many times where he expected like college tours planned a month from now, where I thought in my head, we're not going to hit that deadline. And because he pushed and I had to get on the phone and call people, just like you were calling teams, that, accelerated the expectation and led to greater outcomes because of the expectations being set. And then we had to kind of pursue them. So, yeah, I do remember that kind of quick drama.
No, yeah. You're right. You're right. I mean, again, so we end up doing the merger. It was a learning curve for us. There was, like you said, more events needed to be cranked out because Dave had more pressure from the army, and I guess they immediately, I guess, so they were keeping abreast of us the whole time we were in our 4 years. So they knew what we were capable of, and I guess they just wanted us to just bring our expertise and immediately, like, unleash it. So yeah, we were on the phone a lot, and we just had to crank out more shows. Our first show was November, and then I guess Orlando. It was decent turnout. And then after November, that ends the year. And then in 2003, we end up doing a lot more. More pressure, and then we start cranking out more shows. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, and just I do recall that when we were acquired and we advertised or broadcasted on our website, latinogreeks.com merges with Latino Step. I remember the market kind of like being a bit confused as to what was going on. Like they weren't sure, you know, why were the good guys teaming up with the other guys? Like they didn't get it. And part of me didn't get it as well, obviously beforehand.
Simple. It
But
was simple mathematics. That's what it comes down to. The math. The math adds up. As long as 2 plus 2 equals 4, that's the answer.
yeah, and I think for the teams we had on contracts, like they were concerned of what this might mean. Obviously, you and I knew it didn't change what we were doing or how we were doing it, but teams just they were outsiders, so they didn't really see or didn't know if this was a good thing for the business, even though we said it was, or if it was us selling out to the man.
Yeah, I actually forgot that we even had teams on contract. We had teams on contracts until that point. Wow.
Yeah,
Um, that's interesting. So, again, another key pivotal move that helps us solidify our position in the market, which helps lead to our acquisition, which again helps us, you know, be acquired and in arguably successful outcome for our business. So yeah, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
yeah. The last piece I'll add is, and I remember one other group that was unsure of what this meant for the relationship. That was Urban Latino, because we were publishing a magazine with them separately, and now we were under this new brand. So what did that mean for the magazine perspective? So they were curious as to what it meant. But I think, and we'll talk about this, I guess, in the future, but we did continue to publish as University Latino for another 6 months, I believe, and then we branched out into a standalone magazine, kind of what we had always dreamed of doing. So yeah, it's more to come, but that's the next episode, and I think that's all I have for today.
Thanks for listening. This is Two Frat Boys podcast. Thanks.
Peace.
Peace.